Hello and welcome everyone to Pulse Hex Therapy Live with Maddie Allen and Blaze Makes Music.
Hey everybody, how's everyone doing?
I know I'm doing really well because Richard Hart just streamed. He's been doing a lot of really good content lately. And, oh, I had something playing in the background. Okay, close out of that window. Richard Hart, Hex, Pulse. There's so much going on, so much good stuff.
Man, loving life. Hey, yeah, I've been loving all these extra Richard streams. It's been just amazing entertainment value. There's been a lot of actually interesting stuff that's gone down in some of those streams, so that actually might be something worth chatting about. But yeah, overall, I'm feeling great. I'm in Hex. I've sacrificed for Pulse. What could be wrong?
Yeah, I mean, so Hex is up like over 3,000x in the past year and a half, and that's gotten us to grow our audience. I know that there are a lot of people that watch the show because they are interested in figuring out how to get better with self-help, how to better their mental health. And while this is not medical or financial or therapy advice, it is good entertainment to be talking about ways that people can better their lives.
100%. Absolutely.
So I'm going to run the intro and then we can get down to our freestyle discussion. How about that?
Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
So, has it really been 6 weeks since the last time we did a stream together?
Really? Has it been that long? Oh my goodness. Wow. So much has happened. It's like a whole other lifetime since then, right? Like
Right.
you've had a huge period, like obviously launching the T-Share app, launching the Hex Vegas meetup. You have been a busy guy. How have you been going, I guess, like with that transition? Because I know the last time we spoke it was like the beginning of you moving out of your practice and more full
Yes.
time into Hex. How's that transition been for you?
It's been even better than I thought it would be. And,
Awesome.
I guess when I tell people who ask, I say, I retired and now I work more than ever. And it's really because it's so energizing to, even if it's a cliche or if it sounds like a good soundbite. I mean,
Yeah.
I bought my freedom and Hex allowed me to do that. And
Yeah.
so there's so many ways that I want to give back and pay it forward, right? And so one way has been by collecting Hex testimonial videos, by putting together the first mass Hex meetup, by creating a tool, tshare.app, that allows people to send a link to their friends that they don't have time to onboard and be able to play a 15-second game that allows them to go from their debit card to T-shares in just minutes without asking too many questions.
That is such a game changer there. Like having such ease of access, I think is really going to be revolutionary for Hex and for those new users who they may not necessarily want to go in with a huge investment right up. They might just want to try to understand the Hex ecosystem and the contract, and having something in place where they can go from point A to point B easily, all contained. I know that's going to be useful to so many people I know who haven't managed to quite get them into Hex yet. I think having something like this is going to make all the difference. So yeah, how have you been finding? Like, what's the feedback been like? How's it been operating from your point of view?
It's been a blast. Like it's really interesting how all of my interests are coalescing and integrating together because back when I did the first, Hex conference, I was coming at Hex with this perspective of, I'm in psychology, I want to help people, I want to understand how game theory and crypto can work together. So how, I've been asking back since I learned about Bitcoin and learned how to program a node, oh, how can we program mental health into money? Because it seems like everybody could use money and mental health all at the same time. And so that led me to start talking about it on my channel and the Hex Therapy show. I predicted publicly that I would meet a developer just by talking about it, right? By talking about my ideas and where I was running into problems. And sure enough, I mean, it kind of doesn't even sound right, but so the person who reached out, who's a brilliant dev, goes by the name Future Us. And so
yes, he's lovely.
Yeah. He and I started out not expecting any work from each other and making an agreement to work for free for the community. So we have a mission to not take a fee and to donate all of our work, just like Richard doesn't take a fee when he educates people and changes people's lives. And so we just started off simply having enjoyable conversations that led to us thinking more deeply about the game theory of Hex and understanding that there was this missing spot when it comes to people who people who are in Hex know a lot of people, and that's our target audience, is people who know someone who did well in Hex. And so the first tool that we created, which was tshare.app, was not intended to explain what Hex is, right? The live streams do that. And it wasn't intended to do anything other than take people who are ready and get them in with a small amount. Because we've seen even somebody with $150 who did a test account about 500 or 600 days ago, that test account is already worth $200,000 or more, something like that.
It's mind blowing, isn't it? When you frame it in those terms, just knowing that, this, what seems to be small amount of capital, something that might not even be, particularly significant to you, could be this huge fortune if you monetize the time value, or if you utilize the time value of money through the Hex contract. This $150 you could be handing, like you like to say, Maddie, you could be handing your future self potentially, again, like this person's experienced of, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it really, I know for me, that's really changed the way I look at money now. So now when I'm looking at $100, something that I might have been quite flippant with in the past and maybe easily spent on that, extra food or the extra takeout meal or, some clothes or whatever. Now I'm thinking much more carefully about it, because I'm thinking, am I actually holding a really quite significant sum of money in my hand if I were to put this into Hex? And it really does, it does make you question your spending habits a lot more. And I think in quite a positive way, to kind of recognize how big a difference this could make to your life in the future if you're just smart about it now, I think is incredible.
That's right. Yeah, it's changed my perception of money too, and of value, and to really, it's kind of backwards almost, because you think the more suddenly wealthy someone would get, the more that they would splurge and overspend. But that's not necessarily what I see in the Hex community. I mean, it stands out when people do spend money, but as a percentage of what they've saved, it's incredible to me how many people have spent none of their mad gains in Hex or have spent very little.
Yeah. So, I mean, and don't get wrong, this isn't to say that you should never spend your Hex gains, and we encourage people to,
Correct.
To spend and to enjoy themselves and to reward themselves for good behavior. That's part of it as well. But it is, I think all of those decisions just need to be measured up against, what's the long-term value of this money, and what could it do for you over 2, 3, 4, 15 years, if it's already done this in a year and a half, imagine what could happen in 10 times that amount. So yeah, something to just keep in mind.
Absolutely. And you were asking me about how my progression has been in my retirement, where I'm working hard as a member of the Hex community. And
Yeah.
so that was our first tool that we released, was tshare.app, which is the 15-second onboarding game. And then we recently, shortly thereafter, we released something I can share on my screen here. This is go.tshare.app, and of course it works with MetaMask. And so what it's going to do is it's going to show you, like, this is basically a wallet. It's reading my MetaMask, and it's read only, so I'm going to connect to it, but I don't have to trust it more than I trust MetaMask. And here we can do a stake of any amount, whereas at tshare.app, you can only do a 500 hex stake, because we found that it was so easy for people to press the stake button that we were worried that OGs would accidentally stake all of their liquid hex. It's just, you see a button and you press it, and that's what we were finding, was that was a huge risk. And if that had happened at the exact moment of the rollover, the person wouldn't be able to reverse it. And so we thought, well, okay, let's go ahead and just make it a set amount. At the time it was $40 or $50, and that would encourage somebody, because they can only stake 5, 10, or 15 years, that would stop them from getting information overload or analysis paralysis, and they could just make a small staking ladder, 5, 10, and 15 years, and maybe hold some liquid. And then they can go here, which is where they'll see their active stakes. And we keep building this out more and more. And so actually on here, I do believe this shows your interest minute by minute instead of just every day. So
Wow.
that's kind of cool.
Wow, that's cool.
You can do any amount of hex for any amount of days. But the best part is you can see the chart of future market supply right here while you're making your stake. And so if I go to like 5 years out, then I can click around on here and I can find a spot where it's going to have fewer T-shares coming out. And then that's going to change where it's filling in here on the box. It's going to jump around to different spots. So, and then I hit stake now, and people can't see it, but it pops up in MetaMask, and it's that easy.
That's amazing. And I guess for the newcomers as well, that future market supply, why would you say that's important to know? Like, I mean, I know there's kind of a number of factors or a number of variables happening, and those predictions could change over time. People could start staking, at the times where there's currently some empty spaces on the staking ladder. But would you say that that's something significant for people to understand early, that future market supply of hex?
No, we basically put that in there for the OGs. And I think for early people, I mean, eventually as hex continues to go, or starts to go viral, it's pre-viral right now, but once we get to a viral point, that's going to reduce future volatility in the USD price, because people's hexes can be locked up. So,
love it.
And then we also made a front end called quattrocinco.club, and that only does 5556.
Wait, so this is 3 front ends so far, right?
Yeah.
So the T-Share app, there's the Go T-Share front end, and then the quattrocinco front end.
That's right. Yeah.
Amazing.
And you can see in this wallet, I've done 5 quattrocinco stakes in total. And then I can tap that, and it lets me do another one. I could say 50%, and I can hit the stake button, and boom, it popped up in MetaMask.
Hey,
so
that's
quick.
awesome.
Yep.
I really love that there are so many front ends as well. I think this is another thing that really separates Hex from a bunch of its competition, is the fact that it is legitimately decentralized when you look at front ends. Most other DeFi applications, it's, maybe one website that's really controlling people's access to the contract. And if that website or that particular application were to go down, well, then the supposed decentralization would be pretty threatened at that point. You'd have to say it would be a big impediment to actual decentralization. So in Hex, we've got so many community members who are interacting with the smart contract and creating their own front ends, which really, really means that you've got these various options. So no matter what happens, if there's a problem with one of the other front ends that you're using, you've got a wide variety of choices to engage with the Hex smart contract. And I think, again, this is just another one of those factors that improves the anti-fragility of Hex, improves its security, improves its actual levels of decentralization, and makes me a very excited community member just watching everybody build and develop and grow these access points for all of us. It's pretty amazing.
Yes, we, future us and I were able to do this in like 6 weeks while I was also doing the Vegas meetup and everything else.
Yeah,
So,
like there
live
was so
streaming,
much.
all that. So
Yeah.
imagine what we can do in 15 years as a whole
Exactly.
community.
Exactly. It's so
amazing.
cool. And this is something that I absolutely love about the Hex community as well. Like you said, you somehow just knew that by just talking about an idea, it would come to fruition, right? There would be somebody who's watching a stream or knows somebody who could help to provide the tools and the expertise to get something like this done. And that's something that should not ever be underestimated in Hex. The value of the actual community, the human resources and the human capital that we have, I think, again, is just far beyond what you see in any other cryptocurrency communities. And the fact that it's not only that we have the talent and the resources, but we have the type of people who are willing to put in the time and the work selflessly, like yourself, Maddie, and future us, to improve things for the whole community. Those qualities, I think, are quite rare. And we have hundreds, maybe thousands of those people involved in Hex at the moment in just its first year and a half of existence. So again, I don't want to sound too much like a sales pusher here, but there are some incredible people around that it's really, really worth being in contact with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like that you said human resources, because that word has been, that phrase has been on my mind even when I listen to Richard, his old streams and his new streams. It seems like that's another emergent property of Hex.
Absolutely. And, that gives me a really certain level of comfort as well, looking at, obviously we can see the world has changed quite a lot over the last couple of years, and it's likely to keep changing pretty significantly into the future. And there's going to be this element of uncertainty around how exactly is everything going to look, and how can I best, prepare and plan for my future. And having, a group of people with, like I said, this level of talent, resources, ability to innovate, ability to, change directions, try new things, build new things. I think, again, that we shouldn't underestimate how valuable that actually is in a dramatically changing world.
Absolutely. And I know, like, one thing that Richard seems to harp on that the entire community has been discovering along with him is that Hex has multiple emergent properties, one of which is that it seems to be a life extension technology accidentally. That there seem to be more and more people that reach out to Richard and to other streamers such as myself saying that Hex saved their life, saying that they were suicidal and now they are wanting to live long enough to see their 15-year stake come out. People who are experiencing other mental health benefits other than just life extension. But I think it's really interesting that Richard has raised $25 million for the Sense Foundation, which is going about life extension in order to benefit humanity. And, that's just within the past couple weeks with the Pulse launch. And so I know that there's a lot of
That's
old stuff and new stuff for us to talk about.
Yeah, that is so huge, Maddie. Can we talk about that for a second? Over $25 million raised for charity. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that is the single biggest fundraising event for charity that has ever occurred in cryptocurrency. Would I be out on a limb by saying that?
Absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah, like that is huge. Where does that happen? That people and the people who are donating to Sens, obviously they care about this stuff, but they may have never actually even learnt about Sens or learnt about the Life Extension Project if it weren't for Richard and if it weren't for Hex and now Pulse. So, like to me, this is huge. That's I think the founder of Sens, is it Aubrey?
Yes, Dr. Aubrey de Grey.
I always mix up his name, Aubrey de Grey. He was saying that alone is like 4 years of their budget or more right there.
Yes.
So just to kind of imagine now what that frees them to do, even if you think about that in your personal life, if you don't have to worry about money in your personal life, what does that free you to then go and do and explore and build? And it's kind of like, Richard and this whole project has now allowed Sens to do that. There's not going to be this day-to-day concern about funding and where is the next funding coming from and having to devote some of their mental resources to that. That is taken care of for like 4 years, and they can just go 100% all out on this life extension thing without any distractions really. And I think we're going to see some huge breakthroughs as a result of this event personally. So I'm really, really excited about that. What are your thoughts, Maddie?
Not all medical research is created equally. And when people invest in things that have already been looked at or go in the wrong direction for many years with many dollars, then it doesn't have as much of an impact. I think, this whole concept of buying your freedom being the idea that if you make enough money in crypto, you might not have to work a job that causes you to struggle, causes you to give up time that you would otherwise spend helping others in your personal life or working on personal development, all the things that people do when they become free in a healthy way, right? But at the end of the day, you buy your freedom until you die, right? Like that's the end of buying your freedom. So if you want to buy more freedom, it makes a lot of sense to donate to medical research to extend your life, and not just your sick years that you're extending, but your healthy years. And how interesting would it be if people could choose to stay whatever age they want for whatever duration and continue to, live life in a way that's helpful to others.
Yeah, it's just huge. And I think some of the statistics that Richard has been sharing on the streams that he's been doing recently, I'd never really thought about in those terms, but he's actually so right. The fact that even if you cured cancer, on average, you would only extend the human lifespan by about 3 years. 3 years. I hadn't ever thought about it in those terms before. And that's so correct because, most cancers are happening to people due to aging. They happen when you're at an advanced stage of life, generally. It's something that afflicts older people, again, generally. I know that younger people suffer from cancer as well, but the knowledge that, cancer is actually a symptom of a greater underlying problem, and the focus should be, rather than on the symptom, it should be on what's actually driving these cancers to occur. It's just now that's just a no-brainer to me, and I am puzzled as to why I'd never had that framed to me in quite that way before, whether people had just not thought about it, or whether, people are so distracted, chasing after research funding and grants and stuff to deal with symptoms rather than causes. I'm not sure, but I found that personally really, really eye-opening. Cancer is just a symptom, and it's not going to solve this problem of, hey, we're aging, we're, in our later years of life, likely going to be suffering from, afflictions related to that aging. So let's tackle the cause. To me, that really made things so much clearer for me.
Yeah, it's Richard quotes that there are 7 different ways that cells can become dysfunctional, right? And I was familiar with some of them, before I started listening to his insights. But I agree that the big picture of what kills people didn't occur to me until Richard pointed it out. And I think it's part of his logical nature and his intense study of things that are important and his priorities and whatnot. He, he sees in life, it'd be great to keep more people around, because the more people you have, the more problems you can solve. People are oftentimes problem solvers. And so how great would it be if there were more problem solvers solving problems in the world? But cells, they're just not up to the task for hundreds of years. But they could be, it seems, because there have been certain rat and mice studies. There have been breakthroughs in understandings of how cellular dysfunction occurs and how to stop that from happening. And so the more that we can get this in our lifetimes, probably the better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, it's really been just yet another lesson in how there can be this crowd mentality when it comes to different facets of life, and our focus can be drawn into that quite easily. And I think because the majority of mainstream focus is on, okay, well, let's look at symptoms. Even as a person who I believe has some fairly good capacity for critical thinking, I had not been able to kind of break that pull of having my focus potentially in the wrong place when it comes to human health and illness and what causes disease. And so it's, I think, again, just another lesson to me to really be aware of my assumptions, be aware of where my focus might be going, consciously or otherwise, when it comes to human endeavor, and to just make sure that I do actually have my attention in the most logical place when I'm thinking about where to spend some of my time. And so this has just been another one of those learning episodes, I think, for me, and I've had many of them in my HEX journey. Like I said, just changed the way I'm looking at things and broken my focus a little bit.
Well, I think zooming out, right? I think we are on this cusp of exponential gains in technology. And so what that means on a macroeconomic level is that things should be getting solved and becoming more abundant, right? And that's technology's natural path. Now, on top of that, we have the legacy system that's trying to free ride, trying to rent seek, trying to print money out of thin air, that is only enriching the few with the Cantillon effect. And Richard points it out. In HEX, our fake money is better than the government's fake money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's evident on a lot of levels, and it's something that I encourage people to experience. You can't really, in my opinion, understand what it means to send money to your future self until you do it. And so even if you're time locking an amount of money that doesn't matter to you if it goes to zero. That's, none of us are predicting the value of Hex is going to go to zero. But even if people had thought about, oh, $50, $100, that would be a nice amount to experiment with, to see how it feels emotionally, mentally. Is this going to help me at all? And then if people give it a try and get surprised, then they'll have that experience, that experiential learning. And I think that will, in the end, bring people to a better place, even if they wouldn't have predicted it for themselves. There are people who thought that I was just combining mental health and Hex because those were the two things I was interested in. And then they contacted me later and said, I was surprised, like, actually you were right. Hex is good for mental health. I didn't think my mental health would get better, but now I see that it did because of Hex.
Yeah, and I think that
What's
at
up with
least
that?
what's up with that? How is that happening? I think that at least in part, has something to do with Richard himself. Like obviously prior to Hex, like I hadn't actually known too much about Richard prior to Hex, but having gone back and looked at some of his videos, I know that personal development, self-help was a big part of his content previous to this, and obviously longevity was as well. But I guess specifically in terms of human psychology, he did appear to be genuinely interested in that. Aside from just creating a vehicle to get everybody mad gains, he also wanted people to be happier, to be more actualized, to be able to explore themselves at greater levels. And to me, that kind of means that it's no coincidence that there is this positive benefit psychologically to Hex. I think there's some echo of the designer in that,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's wonderful to see it playing out. And obviously, as a fellow mental health professional, hearing those stories that you talk about, Maddie, of people writing and saying that it saved them from suicide. It gave them something to look forward to. It helped them to overcome problem behaviors. It helped them to create better habits in their life. This is incredible stuff, and this is actually really, really hard to do. Therapy often can take quite some time with people. It takes quite a lot of resources, and I'm not saying that people should not seek therapy if they're having problems with their mental health and just by Hex, nothing like that. But to see similar effects in other areas does require quite a bit of effort. And I'm glad that there is this byproduct in Hex, that people are happier, healthier, and making better decisions. Fantastic, wonderful.
And I think it's part of the truth and the reality of technology that's coming out, right? Because I think that the world does want to save for the future, but if inflation is taking away all your gains all the time and the price of everything keeps going up forever, then it really disincentivizes people to do those health behaviors. I think we kind of misjudge how bad for our mental health it is to be in the current legacy financial system where there isn't a lot of hope for money in the future. It's more like the best game theory is to spend now. And so I've talked with people who are specializing in behaviorism and different types of behavioral psychology, and I brought up this interesting point the other day that in a delayed discounting task, right, that's in the behavioral sciences, that's probably the number one way that economic, like a simple economics task is performed in psychology, or even extending to understanding delayed gratification, right? The marshmallow test, whether it was marshmallows or cookies, whatever it was, they did lots of different versions of that, right? And then even impulsivity is measured sometimes through delayed discounting tasks, and it says, well, do you want $50 now, or do you want $55 in a month? Okay, so you chose $55. Well, do you want $51 now, or do you want $55 in a month? And what they don't measure is what that person's experience has been with money, what their relationship is with money. And if maybe $55 in a month is actually a worse deal because the price of everything is gone up to $60 from 50, right?
100%. Yeah, totally agree. It's it's something that I've been thinking a lot about as well, that it's really, really difficult to be sane in an insane system. You know, that the system is set up to disincentivize behaviors that otherwise should lead to prosperity. It actually punishes you to an extent for trying to save, and for trying to be, diligent in the way that you handle your money. The system just keeps stripping it from you, and also you're in a situation where you don't exactly understand why that's happening. So all you know is that it's sort of like, sand through my fingers, but why is that the case? And there's a level at which people can't even explicitly say why this isn't making sense to them. And so there's just a whole other layer of confusion and neurosis that can create. So I totally agree with you. I love those experiments, but there are these really core facets that perhaps have been overlooked, and that is the way the monetary system actually works. And if you've had these negative experiences, well, then eventually, instead of keeping, hitting your head against the wall, you just got to stop one day, and you can kind of see how people get to a place where they're unable to actually, make good decisions monetarily.
Yeah, it increases stress and probably increases conflict on levels that people do perceive, right? And so, and really, I think it's a product of living in a scarce resource world. And so when there are abundant resources, then there's enough for everybody. But when there are scarce resources, people need to compete and or hurt each other to get ahead and to survive. Even it's a survival thing. And so as technology continues to make an abundant world, we don't see that. And so then it surprises us when something like Hex comes along, when someone like Richard Hart comes along, or Blaze Makes Music, or Maddie ALLin, or any of the other contributors in the space, because there are breakthroughs that are just like, wow, that's an aha moment for me. And when people see that, why are they so surprised is because the environment and the narrative that's been going through society has been so far off. But that's what we would predict almost in a world that's trying to cover up how much abundance there is.
Yeah, for sure. And people sense it. Again, they may not be able to explicitly say what's happening. They just know something's wrong, and it creates a lot of tension. I mean, I know we're beginning to see that kind of spill over a little bit in Australia at the moment. We've had, riots and clashes with police and stuff happening recently, and that's kind of more to do with lockdowns. But one of the major drivers of that conflict was the fact that, people can't work, so they're economically deprived. They're really worried about how they're going to take care of their families, and there's seemingly no response really from the government. But yet I think what makes the whole situation even worse is that there is some awareness, beneath the surface. It doesn't have to be this way, that there is abundance available, but yet it's kind of blocked from the majority of people. What I've found in psychology is that on one level, if people don't feel safe, they're unable to express their concerns. And we are kind of in a situation at the moment where pretty much everybody feels unsafe. You're kind of economically deprived. There's all this like health stuff going on. There's a lot of fear from the media. There's a lot of elements happening, and so people, they don't really feel able to express their concerns, their emotions, their worries publicly. But then what happens is, so people kind of suppress them for a period of time. And rather than us being able to engage in reasonable discourse, it then just gets to that kind of boiling point where people just start exploding. And yeah, unfortunately, I think we're beginning to see that, a little bit now, at least here in Australia. And yeah, it kind of distresses me because I just think, again, exactly all the stuff that you've been saying. The system is set up to create a situation of deprivation. People are aware of it at some level, and but they also don't really see a way out, and that's really hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, solutions that might be possible, especially with PulseChain coming into existence, because it will remove the externality of the ETH fees, stopping people from really being able to onboard nearly for free, to be able to get their full $50 worth of value or something close to that, right? When they're buying for the first time. And yeah. I think although Hex may or may not find a way to create economic equality sooner rather than later, I think it will present an opportunity for people to buy their freedom for pennies on the dollar.
Absolutely. And it just gives people the beginnings, the first taste of interacting with a system that's sane, that rewards you for the right behaviors, that rewards you for saving.
Yes.
That doesn't, hey, day 43, good to see you, mate. Yeah, that doesn't, siphon off your funds through fees and middlemen and other hidden aspects of the system. It's just there. You can interact with it. You can use it in the way that it's intended to be used. And, the way in which that will affect people's psychology, I think, again, cannot be overstated. And I think we've all had that experience of having had our behaviors and our thinking changed by Hex. And I would expect this to keep continuing, if not improving, with the introduction of the PulseChain as well.
One idea that I've had that I would love to see anyone in the community make, including myself or anyone else, would be to start creating systems that allow people to accidentally buy Hex that's staked. And so, for example, if you sold a concert ticket, you could include like a wrapped or an encapsulated stake.
That's cool, yeah.
By marking it up $10 or taking away your own profit, right? And so we live in an entire world where people are used to like things being marked up to a reasonable amount. And so if you go in not expecting to make profit or expecting to make less and just wanting to pump your own bags, if you start handing out, $10 or $50, 15-year stakes, all of a sudden you create a way for people to onboard way faster. I mean, imagine if just like one popular music artist started doing that in their shows and they were onboarding literally like, I don't know, how much does the stadium hold? Like 20, like half of the people who are in Hex right now, you could like in 2 shows, in 2 nights, you could double the amount of people in Hex.
100%. I've been thinking about this a lot, Maddie. I've been thinking about how like events and music, how you could start to use these areas to promote use of the system. So I'm with you there. I think there's some pretty cool ideas in what you've just said.
Yeah, and I think the community will continue to innovate and just like blow all of our minds how well things can go. I know one of the things that we're all trying to wrap our heads around right now has to do with PulseChain, pulsechain.com.
Indeed. Yes. Yes. My mind is still processing the pulse chain, I believe.
Sometimes
So go
sometimes
on.
I come up with like such wild game theory, and then I'm not even sure if I should say it publicly.
Okay. There's a big part of me that wants to encourage you to share it publicly because it'd be awesome, but obviously no pressure because I know
Until
sometimes these things are better left unsaid.
Yeah, until somebody educates me about like why I shouldn't spill the beans, then I'm gonna go ahead and just like try to predict and read through the lines on everything Richard is saying. He's been saying a lot.
He has been saying a lot. I mean, some of the things I've been noticing, he's been saying, he has been drawing attention to the quick growth of the Pulse Chat Telegram room, for example, and how quickly that's grown. He's been drawing attention to. He did mention something yesterday, I believe, in a tweet around, Pulse having its own front ends for certain applications, which I thought was interesting. There's been a lot. He's spoken about founders of projects reaching out to him, whales of certain other coins who hated Hex but apparently love Pulse. So I think he sees a lot in terms of the network effect. I think I can say that that's, I think, a pretty obvious fact that he sees lots of avenues for people to be onboarded, and a lot of ways in which the network effect could take hold. So that's pretty cool. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think that's in and of itself is going to be pretty amazing.
So this is pulselead.xyz, the site where we're tracking, like whoever made this in the community. It says down here at the bottom. And I actually donated a little bit of Hex to this group because this tool is so awesome that they've made here, and it's just showing the leaderboard basically, and how much has been sacrificed based on just the coins that they're tracking. And
Yep.
I mean, it's like $29 million for number one, and then there's a couple other whales in spots 2 and 3 that are neck and neck, 19 million. And so this is really exciting, and it looks like there's 36,000 wallets that have already sacrificed, and I think people are incentivized to use only one wallet because then they rank higher and get a larger volume bonus.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, this is very, very impressive. Before coming into this, I knew that Pulse would generate a lot of dollars in terms of the sacrifice phase, but I have a feeling this is going to blow all predictions out of the water. I think this next week is going to be, this next week and a half is going to be crazy, really, really crazy. And I'm here for it.
I think that the OA is going to come in. The Hex OA is going to come in to the sacrifice period. That's what I think. I think the OA or other whales are going to pump the price of Hex in the final minutes of when the volume bonus still applies. I think that they're going to spam the ETH network so that you have to have $1,000 to make a transaction. I think that the price of Hex is going to go parabolic, but it's going to be really hard to trade. So it could spike up to insane levels because there could be more than one whale that is trying this strategy to get their final run worth so much. That would be pretty wild. There's interesting stuff going on with the V3 liquidity, where there's this buy wall that exists at 5 or 5.5 cents. like I don't know. I'm not sure of the exact figure. Maybe something like $200 million worth of buys that can be moved at any minute, I assume, because it's, because it is liquid liquidity or whatever. And so that could be moved up or down
Yep.
or removed completely. And so I don't think
My,
we've seen like all the whale games that will exist. What are you seeing?
No, I agree with all of that. There's been some clear games already. Obviously, a couple of days ago we saw some pretty significant price movements, which were interesting. And as that was occurring, it became suddenly very, very expensive to transact on the Ethereum chain. So I think, like you said, we saw the beginnings of the whale games there, and maybe some hints of what's to come towards the end of the sacrifice period. I agree. I think there could be something insane happen on, across those last couple of days, with similar tactics being employed. So that's going to be really, really interesting to play out. And look, I think also, given that we're seeing these games, start to play out, and we could perhaps cast our eyes forward to think that, okay, there are going to be a number of bigger wallets competing with each other. It might also be worthwhile just chatting about what that means for some of the smaller fish, and how to approach that, because the way I'm looking at it at the moment, the whales are going to whale, and they're going to be throwing a lot at this, and they can pull off some pretty interesting maneuvers. And so, I think for the rest of us, just being aware that, particularly if you're waiting for that last day final pump, it might not work out the way that you're expecting.
Correct.
And so I think it's really, really important that people are in, with at least a solid percentage of what they're planning to sacrifice, sooner rather than later. Personally, I know that there are plays to be made on the price of Hex and so forth, but you've got to measure that against the 5% increase or decrease in the number of points you'll receive for that USD value over that same period, and the fact that there are going to be some very interesting plays going on in the network towards the end of the sacrifice period. And also just ask yourself, if you were to miss out by waiting too long, how are you going to feel about it? You know what I mean? So I just think it's worth just bearing in mind that there are big players with tactics that they have up their sleeve, and you, relative to that, don't have as much power in the situation, but you do have the ability to make a good, sensible, strong decision, and begin getting some of your funds into sacrifice now, if that's what you're choosing to do. Sorry about the rant there. I'll let you go.
That's totally welcome. You came to the right place. Have you sacrificed?
Yeah, the majority of my funds are in at this point, I would say. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I like looking at what I actually did compared to kind of what I think, because then I put my money where my mouth is. And so what I did is, if I have 2 to 5% of my total value of Hex, if I have that liquid for my yearly expense, because I'm living 2 to 5% of my life per year, then that's an amount that I'm comfortable having liquid. Although I do want to experiment with having less liquid and having monthly stakes instead of just yearly stakes.
Yeah.
But recently I had a big stake come out from the beginning of Hex, and I rebought my number of T-shares. And so that was a big step for me.
Amazing.
Knew that I wanted to do that, but I didn't know if I would actually be able to press the button and feel so horrible as I did when I sent money to my future self.
Wow.
To year 16 of the project. I
Beautiful.
made my 16th step on the ladder, And I was
Beautiful.
thinking, oh, I could just, skip this year or something. No, stopped that thought right away.
Yep.
And so I rebought my T shares, and then with the liquid that I have, I decided to do, I would say about 25% already on pretty much day one, I would say, into the sacrifice. And then I still have another 5 or 10% that I would be willing to put in if the price of Hex significantly increases. And,
Yep.
I think that could happen. So
Definitely. Definitely.
I've
I mean,
got that like on deck.
absolutely, absolutely. And everybody's going to make that decision for themselves around, what percentage they're willing to allocate to a scenario like that. But like I said, whenever making that decision, always just bear in mind, how is it going to feel if you miss out on getting in that percentage of your stack entirely. And if you're willing to potentially miss out, then you can push it later. But I'd say, if you want to be in this thing, make sure that you're on the front foot, you're in, and then the rest of it is just kind of gravy in case of a price pump, and the possibility is very much there. The chart looks good, and there's very little liquidity. There's very little, hex available really to buy, and so there are a lot of pumpamentals there that could send the price flying at a certain point. But just know you won't necessarily be able to transact on the network if and when that happens. So there's a lot to weigh out there, and like I said, I think also just to keep in the back of your mind that any price point you get in on in this sacrifice period is amazing. It's incredible.
I love that point. Yes.
It is such a deal no matter what, even if you end up having sacrificed, at the lowest price point of this period, you're getting 10,000 points per dollar value. This is incredible at the ground floor of what is likely going to become the most important infrastructure in crypto. Hands down, incredible deal. Nothing to worry about here. So the rest of this is just, how rich am I going to get? Because you're gonna increase your wealth dramatically by holding any, not financial advice. My belief is that,
Yes.
the way I'm thinking about it for myself is that no matter how much I have, this is going to increase in value over the next couple of years quite dramatically. And there's a part of me that's just saying, look, be grateful for that, because this is such an incredible opportunity. So yeah, that's maybe something else to just also have in the back of your mind as well, is that you're getting an amazing deal regardless of what happens with price.
And one of the things that I was so excited about when the Quant Gang met on Tuesday was that there were 4 or 5 of us there, and there were at least 4 different opinions on what's going to happen in the sacrifice phase. And at the end of it, we were all still friends, right?
Yeah.
That's saying something. And
That's important.
so my opinion was basically what I just said. And also I would say I did a quarter to a third of my bag for Pulse. I did directly to the Sens Foundation using the same address as the address that I used to send directly to the pulse.info sacrifice chamber. And I don't know if the price, right, because Future Us thinks that the price is going to dip right after the launch of Pulse, and other people, wanted to go in early. And so I respect all opinions, but I do know that Pulse is going to be something that is going to push crypto and humanity forward, because, and I didn't state this publicly, I think I didn't say out loud, but I was definitely thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool if Richard started to release different details during the sacrifice phase as it becomes 5% more expensive for points each day? if he were to create some sort of a buzz or an increased understanding or confidence that gave people 5% or maybe 15% more confidence each day, then that might be valuable, or it might be something that would be part of his strategy. Well, I'm not sure if you saw the Ivan on Tech interview.
I did, yes.
Wow. I'm still trying to unpack that.
Look, it was huge, a lot of technical stuff in there. I'm probably, less good at that side of things, but just everything that I heard inspired confidence, exactly like you just said. It built my confidence, and I'm also really looking forward to the feedback that people will give from the public testnet when it becomes available as well. I think that could be a really big confidence builder for people.
David Feeder released an episode yesterday or today that walked through a very, very technical route of how to set up a test node. And so that was pretty cool. I listened to way more than I understood about
Cool.
it. David's a great guy and is very technologically, well, his job is in IT. But what I was hearing Richard say, and I could be using my intuition a little bit too much here, but tune into Quant Gang and I'll ask them too.
Yeah.
I think Richard has uncovered something that will be the most powerful concept in crypto. And just a few minutes before you and I went live, he went ahead and named Hart's Law. So this is breaking news for everybody. Richard Hart has decided on one thing that he has discovered that will now be called Hart's Law. So that's how important this is to Richard, that there are, he's even said before that smart people think of lots of good things that could be laws. And it's a shame that our naming convention is naming it after a person when somebody could have more than one law. But he seems to have committed. Hart's Law is going to be this idea that he identified, which is why cryptos move up and down together with Bitcoin and Ethereum, is because they are trading pairs and their liquidity is tied together. Well, based on the Ivan on Tech interview that Richard did this week, I'm willing to bet that Richard will use this understanding in order to quickly become a much more successful chain than Ethereum. Because what could happen is, he said, if other chains are playing nicely, then we might not have a problem. But if they're not playing nicely, then I think what he was saying is that that someone on the Pulse side could open a bridge that becomes like a one-way bridge where the liquidity would flow. And then he also said giving everybody a free copy on PulseChain could incentivize them to create an Ethereum and ERC20 version liquidity pair. And so by creating wrapped everything on the Pulse network would basically suck all of the liquidity and value off the Ethereum chain.
I see.
Very quickly.
Yeah. That's really, really possible. Look, I agree that I don't think you're overusing your intuition, because I think Richard clearly has a plan here. He's got, there's a number of outcomes I think that he's sussing out. And like you said, in scenario A, if, Ethereum is cooperative, it will mean that a certain course of action is taken. And then if they're not, there is a backup plan, which could in fact benefit us even more. And that tends to be the way with Richard, right? Like, if people don't cooperate, if they don't play ball, he tends to find solutions that actually make us better off than if they had. Like, he'll kind of bounce forward from a challenge or a setback. So rather than just compensating or creating like a plan B, he'll create a better situation when there is resistance. So I have total faith that will occur if there isn't that cooperation. And I'll be sitting back with some popcorn just watching that play out, because I think it's going to be pretty interesting. And I guess also just on that liquidity question and the Hart's Law question, I also wonder how this might impact the initial liquidity pools for Pulse, and how attached to Ethereum the Pulse price will be versus USDC. And so that, I think that'll be kind of interesting to watch as well. Exactly what will happen there and how that might affect price too.
Oh yeah, I think that's going to be central. And
Yeah.
obviously you've listened closely to the hints that Richard has been dropping over his hours of content, right? And I think that it is increasing my confidence as well as yours in what we're looking at here, and it's really exciting. I mean, Richard later said that he kind of accidentally let part of his plan slip, and I believe that's true. I believe that he was being treated totally different by Ivan on tech than normal, and Ivan is just like becoming a Hex believer, and it wasn't like, what kind of scam are you running? It was like, wow, teach us everything
This is
you can.
huge. Yeah.
And Richard ran with it and really demonstrated knowledge at the right time. So this liquidity thing, and what's the value of Pulse going to be compared to USD? Also, what are the stable coins going to be worth? What are the NFTs going to be worth? I mean, there are a lot of things that even Richard can't predict.
Yeah.
But I think that there are a lot of things that he can predict. And I think that will be beneficial to people who want to expose what crypto should have been, or what its highest aspiration was something that would identify admin key crap versus things that are closer to the real thing. And I think Hex, having the properties that it does, that we repeat all the time, that's really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think the bridge itself is pretty key as well. Like the fact that there are no admin keys, it's not centralized. It's going to be a decentralized bridge, which so many of the other tokens don't have. Matic, for example, there are admin keys, so that's going to be a big deal. But I also wonder, Maddie, if you could clarify something for me. With the initial price setting of Pulse, is this going to be somewhat or basically wholly dependent on the first person who adds liquidity to a pair? How, because my understanding is that there's going to be someone who will put in a liquidity into a pair, and that they will essentially have some control over setting that first price. How do you look at how that might kind of play out in the early stages? Because I legitimately don't actually know. I have theories running through my mind of what could happen. But I'd be interested to hear your take.
Yeah, I think that the public testnet will get released, of course, any day now, and then of course the sacrifice phase will end in about 9 days and 2 hours from now. Then that list will need to be checked and double checked and made public and verified. And of course, that's after all the excitement that I'm predicting with the origin address that may or may not occur. And then what will happen next? So then we will know how much Pulse will be in the world, but we won't know what its starting price will be, and we won't know what the price of anything else will be. At this point, Richard will announce that there will be a snapshot for the world's largest airdrop, and that could be a significant price pumping event as well.
Exactly.
So the price of Hex could end up anywhere. I mean, it could go down too. We got that buy wall at 5 cents, so that is interesting. But then there's also the sky's the limit, right? And
I have a strong feeling that 5 cent buy wall will move up, if anything.
I hope so too. And let's see. So then what we need is we need a situation, and Future Us was kind of explaining this to me on a more technical level just earlier today, that basically because there's going to be 10,000 X Pulse, and there are all these liquidity pairs that will exist on the PulseChain. Richard is designing 2.5% of the Pulse supply to be put into a fund that's going to go through and balance out all the liquidities to basically put more Pulse into that side of the equation, so that there's not an instant arbitrage opportunity where all the value actually gets sucked in the wrong direction. And what that'll look like, I think Richard said that there will be a full day probably for accounting purposes where the value of everything that's been airdropped is 0. And then the bot will kick in, and then when the bot balances everything, then it will be price discovery.
Yeah, that will be the first act on the network will be that AMM fixer contract, right? So it'll go along and fix all the ratios of the PRC to Pulse tokens. It's going to be wild. It's going to be so interesting to watch price discovery on the Pulse chain. And like you, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be really, really interesting. I also think it's interesting that Richard keeps saying he'd like to see the price of Hex expensive on both chains. So I think there's a pretty significant hint in the fact that he keeps repeating that as well. And I do think that AMM fixer contract is going to, I think it's going to create quite an interesting floor for the price of PHEX over on the Pulse chain. But also, like, I don't know, I also have this theory because people are expecting that we will see a dump in the price of Pulse early on. Like it'll kind of start high, quite a bit higher than what we obtained our Pulse points for, and then dump quite quickly. I'm not sure about that. I actually have a sneaking suspicion that the price may actually start low and then actually just pump from there. And it might not play out the way that people are expecting in terms of seeing a dump on the other side of all this. So again, all just pure speculation, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But
I thought at first it was just going to be a thing that was kind of duct taped on to make sure that we would have cheap transactions. But then if we think about it, the total supply is going to go into existence right away. And then it's going to be deflationary, which I don't think it's going to deflate very much very quickly, because it's not going to take a lot of Pulse to do a transaction. And because I do think that the OA will enter with, like, I don't know, $5 to $9 billion at the very end of the volume ramp. And that will cause the market cap and the total supply of Pulse to go way higher than Bitcoin's.
Yeah.
And so I could imagine the starting price of Pulse's market cap being like bigger than Bitcoin. And then people will call that a scam. They'll call the OA entering a scam. But it won't matter, because what could happen is one by one, we could see the highest ERC20 market cap coin have a bridge connected to it directly, and just have, like, all of a sudden that ERC, right? The PRC20 could shoot to the top of the list And then the next one shoots to the top, one by one, they fall. And what's that going to do? It's going to cause people to already know what's going to happen next. It's going to give people that confidence and that experience. It's going to incentivize people trading. But what happens when you do move your little liquidity and then subsequently move your value onto the Pulse network? Well, you might end up buying Pulse and you might end up buying Hex because you've been converted into a believer because it pays to believe.
There's so much here. Hey, like there are just so many scenarios that could play. I'm just so excited, but I also think it makes sense, like that the PHEX price will pump very significantly on the other side of the chain. I mean, if we're going to end up with, we're on track for over $1 billion here going into PulseChain. And if just a small percentage of that filters back out into PHEX, then I don't know. I'm just going to say that it's that the pumpamentals are there at the moment to cause something pretty dramatic. So I think that shouldn't be underestimated. And the other question I have for myself though, right, is how big is the market cap actually going to be? Because on one hand, I can see, it being really smart to just have this huge market cap and bring a lot of attention to the chain really quickly by just, suddenly being bigger than Bitcoin, right? That would be hilarious and amazing. But like if market cap is just price times circulating supply, it's not necessarily dependent on how much money actually goes into the sacrifice phase. So I know that it should bear on it somehow, but the way that the price discovery will occur, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's linked directly to the amount of money in the sacrifice phase, because there's going to be an initial price that's just set, like it's just going to be discovered when the liquidity is on the bridge.
Yeah, I think again, it's hard for us to imagine how well this experiment could go.
Yeah.
Because we're giving away free money and we're creating a one-way bridge of value from Ethereum to Pulse. And I don't think that there's any way to stop someone from making a bridge.
Yeah.
A bridge is just a contract with liquidity. And so if you trust it, or even better, if it's a trustless bridge, then even if Richard is playing nice, someone else could come along and say, oh, I'm a dev and I like Pulse. So boom, here, we're going to move, we're going to create the tool that's necessary for this value to move over. And then all those people are going to end up believing in Pulse and Hex. And it's even better if people start off not believing, right? Because then they're going to dump their Pulse. They're going to dump their PRC 20s. But what are they going to dump it for? They're going to have to dump it for Pulse, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So that's going to be really, really interesting as well, because I can see that, I think that's why this launch is so different to the launches of other forks, because we've got this entire system state that's coming over, right? Like, that's why I think if people are predicting a dump in the Pulse price early on, I think that could be misguided. I think particularly given that there are all of these PRC 20s and people might be moving from PRC 20s into Pulse, I just think that's going to create a pretty interesting scenario. And to me, that doesn't seem like the sort of situation where the price of Pulse would dump, personally. But
if you have the origin address coming in and owning 90% of the supply of Pulse and never selling Pulse, then it doesn't matter what the starting price is, because everybody who dumps their coins for pennies on the dollar could get bought up by people who do believe, and could possibly get bought up by Richard, right? Richard has only recently started saying, everybody thinks I'm, all the non-believers think that he's going to sell and rug pull. Well, what if he starts buying Hex
Yeah,
instead?
what if there's unreasonable buying? Yep.
He said that
Yep.
2 or 3 times.
That's a massive hint. Like that's some big brain hints there. I just think that's so clear what he's saying there. But yeah, man. I mean, look, if I also think that the behavior of the OA is being dramatically underestimated here, because if the OA does anything at all, it's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. And if, like you say, if the OA ends up sacrificing everything, um, game over. Like it's huge.
Yeah, that would dilute the whales, right? And that would give the OA enough pulse to stalk the whales like the origin address has done in Hex, right? Everybody is telling me that the OA is not going to sacrifice for Pulse. And I just keep getting stronger and stronger in my opinion that it will, because why would Richard or the OA or whoever take something that worked in Hex and then not use it in the next thing on top of everything that's new, right? And so
I also think, how okay, so 1% of those supply is being minted to the whatever we're going to call it on Pulse, the Genesis address on Pulse. I just can't imagine a situation where Richard doesn't have, or the OA, whoever's controlling the OA, doesn't have access to a majority of the supply of Pulse. Like, I think that there are too many benefits to it. Like you said, it's worked in Hex.
yes.
To one, for price performance, two, for just sort of general security of the network, and three, just it kind of means that there is this what am I going to call it, like there's a king on the chessboard at all times. There's always a trump card, for example, that can be played. And I think the value of that over the long run in the Pulse ecosystem is going to be similar, if not greater, to the value of it in the Hex ecosystem. So I just think whatever mechanism it might be, Richard and whoever's controlling the OA will have a way of controlling a majority of the supply on Pulse. I just can't see it. Just can't see it not happening, personally.
Thank
But
you. Thank you.
yeah,
One person agrees with me out of
look, I've thought
everybody.
it from the beginning. Like my theory, my like crazy theory from the beginning was that the OA would just sacrifice everything. But I could be completely wrong. He does absolutely nothing, and this has all just been a thought experiment for Neil. But to me, there are just some pretty compelling reasons. So yeah.
And then what happens to everything else that has been? So let's take the sacrifice address that's been dumping everything except Hex. What do we think is going to happen to those coins?
They'll just never, like the other tokens. I can't speak for what's going to happen to the other tokens, but the Hex, I think, will just stay there forever. I just don't think it'll move.
The sacrifice address, has that been dumping for USDC and other stables? Is that
I think
where
so.
the ETH
Like
has been going?
I haven't been following it too closely, but my belief is that at least some of it has gone into USDC. I don't know about the other stables, and I don't know how much exactly. I do know that none of the Hex has moved.
Yeah. I kind of want to know. I want to know, where does the ETH go? I know we're not supposed to ask that, but it seems relevant.
We're controversial here.
It's different when we ask, right? Like, let me see. Oh, is this okay? Is this the? Oh, this is the God Whale. Okay, the God Whale has 1.9 million hex left. And the person who's winning the 0xA46 is the person who's winning the sacrifice. Maybe I'll have to look at it later, but yeah, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes down. I think Blaze and I are the two that are calling that the OA might go in and sacrifice. I did not correctly predict the behavior of the OA during the big payday. And there were a couple other people in the community who did predict that correctly. But people need to remember that was actually a really big surprise, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was really, really new to the whole community at that point. I didn't have any idea what was going on. I was like, what's going on? What's the OA address? Like it was all completely brand new to me. But from what I understand, it was difficult to predict that one. Yeah, and look, like I said, could be completely wrong. These are just some speculations that I'm throwing out and that Maddie's throwing out. But definitely fun to think about and fun to kind of speculate on what would happen if that were to occur, because it is a little bit of an elephant in the room. What is the OA going to do?
What if, wait, so if the bridge is one way, I don't know if I should say this. All right, we've gotten to the point in the game theory where I'm going to stop saying things out loud. Like,
Okay. Fair enough. No pressure from my end.
Yeah, 'cause I don't see the benefit, because I don't want to break the game theory. I think okay, so I'll just speak in concepts. So one concept that I've noticed is that with airdrops, and in particular with airdrops, that the element of surprise is critical. That if you can surprise the market, then you can do things that otherwise you would not have been able to do.
Yeah.
And so I don't see any value for me just like predicting something correctly and being like, yay, I predicted it. And then it could possibly change the outcome or something. So.
I totally agree. And I think we may have seen some of that actually happening in this sacrifice period, because I think a lot of people started talking about the price pump of Hex during sacrifice phase and then waiting till later in the phase. And I think that may have produced some counterintuitive behavior, possibly. So I definitely get what you're saying. It's a little bit like the Schrodinger cat situation. Like the cat is there and not there until observed, kind of thing. So I think I empathize and trust your judgment with how much you're willing to say.
And yeah, I think that I am going to value my Hex more than ever now.
Same. Same, massively. Yeah, I mean, Hex is still so incredible, and it's still my store of value, and I'll never think of anything else as that. And perhaps something else maybe for people to keep in mind as well when they're considering their sacrifice and how much to allocate to it as well is, like you said earlier, there is in fact like a second pumpamental at play here post the sacrifice phase, and that there's going to be a snapshot, and we have no idea what that's going to do to price as well. So just a kind of another variable to keep in your mind that Hex is always becoming more scarce. The T-share rate is always going up, and nothing's going to change that.
Yeah, I mean, imagine how scarce it could become, and I think people who are sacrificing are going to do well, like you said earlier, and people who hold Hex are going to do well. I think that we're in the two best designed products that exist in crypto, and that's really going to bode well for us. And I think I think it really will continue to allow the community the freedom to be thinking about mental health, to be thinking about how can I build community, how can I pay this forward, not only to myself but to others. And so I'm really excited to see what happens. I know that I'm working really hard with Team Money to plan the next HEX conference.
Awesome.
Yes.
Excited for that, for sure. Is there any preliminary details or any thoughts you can share?
Yeah. So we're trying to look at like, what should our ethos be and like, what should our guiding principles be? It's really cool in the HEX community because when people come together who share the same values, then we spend a lot less time on drama and a lot less time on like worrying like, oh, how can we be profitable, like this and that. And we can really focus on what matters to the audience, right? Because the target audience, I believe people in HEX are people that, care about making the world a better place, care about mental health, care about professionalism and kind of the scientific ideas that can be contributed to the conference, as well as just building community. I mean, listen to Whales Only describe what the experience was like in Vegas. And I'll point out, he predicted that ahead of time and then was able to follow it up. And he's probably the best person to ask, like, what really happened in Vegas, because it's exactly as he described. There was an energy that many of us hadn't felt before. And at the same time, it was something that was expected in the sense that we had all been building up this energy, even through screens. And so for me, I mean, it flew by because I probably took on a little bit too much of the organizing role myself. And that's why I'm excited that I'm going to get a lot more help for the next one that we're going to have. There's going to be the online portion that's going to happen again for the second year in a row on exactly the dates, January 6th through 9th, which is also Joe Hexotic's sobriety date. And
Nice.
just so happened to be when we planned the first HEX conference online. And so we'll have the online part that everybody in the world will be able to participate in. And then 2 months later on 6 through 9, so March 6th through 9th, will be the in-person part in Las Vegas.
Also, what date was that, Maddie?
That will be 3/6 to
9.
3/9/2022.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to being there this time. Like it's I saw how awesome it was, and would love to get involved in it. So yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. And like you said, with additional people helping out with organizing, and now with more people being in the community, and now also even having some what I call it, cross fertilization with the Pulse network as well. I'm sure it will be larger in terms of numbers and people attending, and I'm very, very excited about that.
And I think this will be much more to the format of a scientific conference. That's one of my areas of expertise, is going to different scientific conferences all around the world and presenting research and knowing how they're organized in terms of having breakout sessions, maybe even poster sessions, having forums where streamers can show off their personalities to their fans. We will have keynote speakers. And my vision, and I think what is going to define, because I hope that many leaders in this community put on conferences, put on meetups. Like this is a decentralized community It's not about me. It's about the community building that, of course, is going to happen on a larger scale the more people who get involved. And so I predict that at some point it's going to be like a continuous live stream. There's going to be unlimited amounts of channels you can watch with Hex streamers. There is going to be continuous meetups. I know that the Germans, Abit and Hex Lion Patrick, Crypto Sparbach, are getting ready to start their United States tour where they're going to stop in like 25 cities.
Sick. That's awesome.
And do meetups in every place,
Nice.
right?
Yeah,
and
that's really cool.
I have nothing to do with that. It's just them being awesome, right? And so for this, this second conference that I'm putting on, my theme is going to be very scientific. It's also going to, I think, probably exclude legacy finance magnates. And so what that means is that, there's going to be a portion of the Hex community that really wants to hear from famous people who are already billionaires who have nothing to do with crypto and wants to like lure them in, and that's going to pump our bags too. But for me, it's like I want to keep the expenses reasonable because I'm still very bullish on the price of Hex and Pulse, and I would feel bad if people spent too much money on a conference and then they had less gains, right? Because there are going to be a lot of people who have already become millionaires or already become, much richer than they have on any other investment, right? And then there's also going to be people who are on the edge, and that's what I've already seen by doing these experiments with, the online conference was free, and then the meetup was like, could have been very low cost for people if they, and in the instructions it warned people like, oh, that $15 hand of blackjack, could have been $100 million if you invested it in Bitcoin, and like, oh, hint, Hex is designed better. And so that's why what I want to do with the tickets is to not pay those high cost speakers and make it more of something that's going to be scientific and affordable and community driven. And then I hope, because I will go to the conferences that people put on with Nelly and Garth Brooks and
Nelly, is he going to do Ride With Me?
yes, the Pulse version, and then he's going to give out free NFTs, right? And then there's going to be all these real estate people and all these famous legacy finance people there too, right? Because everybody, I like to say there's two types of people in the world: the people who are with it and the people who are going to be with it when it comes to Pulse and Hex. So.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I love that vision. And I think also like, we can't underestimate the value of fun in bringing the community together as well. And I think the strengthening of the community was one of the real benefits of what happened in Vegas, from what I can tell as an outsider, having not been there myself and not actually experienced it. It does seem that everybody came back feeling much more connected, much more on the same page, much more on the same mission, and that's kind of huge, particularly when we're dealing with this decentralized, autonomous smart contract thingy, like that seems like it could be really impersonal, but we've also managed to actually build this really vibrant, strong, connected, fun-loving community. I think can only benefit, the strength of the network overall. So that's a big part of it, I think.
I think, to your point, like money is a belief system and therefore is not tangible. And so we have these pieces of paper that are obviously not worth the number that's printed on them.
Yep.
And that is our reminder that this is supposed to be valuable, that we're supposed to believe. And in crypto, it's a little bit even more abstract and intangible until you see the people and until you read the code or do one of those two. Then you can't touch it until you can, right? And even with Hex being 4-dimensional in terms of time locked, so I can see the number go up, but I can't touch it. Just because that's delaying gratification doesn't necessarily make it more real for me. It makes it less real.
Yeah.
Until I see the community and people come out from behind the screen into 3D, right? Like screens are 2D, and now we have 3D people who seem to be the same people that they are online. Like that's another thing that popped out at me that Wales only identified and Kareem identified, and just about everybody else that was there said, hey, everybody else is acting like they do on screen in real life. How weird is that?
Yeah. Just that confirmation. It must have been wild, man. Because like it's funny how like subtly different that is. Like you are the same person, but you're in the real world. Like this is, you're a person I could like high five or hug or whatever. Like there's a whole bunch of other neurons kind of connecting around that when that happens. So yeah, that is really, really cool. I really like that.
And so to continue to make things tangible, and I also know, like for example, on the Discourse Syndicate show, that's apparently where Steph and Firebun met, was like on that show, right? And now they've created Staker.app, which continues to be and has been for a long time the way that people came to understand how valuable T-shares are, how your rank can motivate people to save more for their future, right? And is an onboarding ramp, is something that's using advanced technology, and so the more that people connect. Joe Hexotic and I started Hex Therapy because we met in Discourse Syndicate
amazing
chat. So
that's really cool. Yeah, man. And like I think we're fundamentally social creatures, like we're not sociopaths. We care about other people. We want to feel connected to them. We want to know that, we have our people, and, there is that desire to connect that's just innate in all of us. And I've definitely had the sense, even though I'm kind of I'm over here on the other side of the world, perhaps to a lot of the Hexicans, in a sense, I've like found my people. It's people who, we might be all very, very different characters and have our own personality quirks and all that sort of stuff, but we've got some very fundamental beliefs in common, very fundamental values in common, and all of the like really, really important things are there. And definitely can never speak too highly of the community. It's been awesome just meeting everybody, even just by stream. So I can only imagine what the 3D real world experience would be like.
And I'm hoping that by March, the world will be open enough that we can celebrate the worldwide community of Hex.
Me too, man.
We were missing you guys. We were missing you guys in person in Vegas.
Gosh. Yeah, I've started referring to what's happening in Australia as Prisoner Winter. And I hope that Prisoner Winter will be over pretty soon. And we'll all be able to connect, because it did suck a bit, like missing out. But like I said, I'm just happy that everybody kind of got to get together and actually start forming those bonds in the real world. So yeah, whenever I get to experience it will be awesome.
Maybe you'll even be willing to do a talk or a streamer presentation or something, like meet the fans, or scientific talk about mental health or therapy. Or
I would love to, man. I would love to. Actually, yeah, I've been having a couple of ideas that I was gonna hit you up about and get your thoughts on. So yeah, maybe we'll chat about those ideas at some point.
It's yeah, I would love to. I think this comment from Crypto 303, this community has a really high ratio of great high value people compared to a-holes. We are lucky, or we've gravitated together for other reasons apart from number go up. I think that's really true. And one of the things that definitely doing these psychology gang shows with you and thinking deeply about what hex means beyond just the money, you know, kind of gives me this hope and this positive hypothesis that maybe it's not just that we're attracting good people, but that we're actually minting good people because we've created this new monetary environment, right? Where it's incentivizing healthy behaviors, saving for the future. And maybe that is what's leading to the behavior change that we want to see in the world. Is it's starting with us and our relationship with money and our environment that forms our relationship with money. And you could probably speak to that as well as how you've seen when people's environments change, then their behavior changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive thing. Hey, you know, I think people often don't realize how much our environments shape our behavioral patterns. There are all sorts of triggers. We form associations. We form kind of implicit memories of certain physical spaces, but also, you know, the systems that we're operating in. And you know, when those systems are unhealthy, it's kind of like, you know, having a bad memory triggered, or having a, you know, the memory of an unpleasant experience triggered, and so that will then go on to affect your mood, the way that you're thinking, the way that you're interacting with others, and there's this huge kind of domino effect of being in unhealthy environments. And so sometimes the most powerful thing you can do, like, I mean, I know for some people that I've worked with who are struggling with depression, who are just really struggling with the energy component, which is a big part of depression, is you just feel really, really low on energy. Doing a simple thing like changing up the arrangement of your bedroom, you know, like changing the way your bed is facing, or moving, you know,
Nice.
you know, moving some clothes, you know, from one side of the closet to the other, moving where your couch is situated in your lounge room, is enough to just subtly change things, or kind of interrupt a pattern just enough that there's an opening there, there's a space again in which a new behavior or a new habit can begin to form. And I find that real simple stuff to be sometimes the most powerful at just, you know, interrupting that pattern and getting change to begin.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've seen the same thing, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's super underrated. The mini interventions that can happen, or the mini behavior changes, because really probably what's happening on a process level for somebody when, for example, to address their depression, they're changing the direction of their bed. What's happening is they're doing a behavior that doesn't take a whole lot of energy, and then they're finding that they have been successful with that. And so they're contacting like success in the sense that they've found a low motivation goal that they then complete, and then they can feel good about that.
Yep.
It's also a form of behavioral activation. It also hits with like the Zen, the art of moving
Like
around
the
yourself.
feng shui stuff.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It absolutely does. And there is something to feng shui. I mean, I don't know a lot about it. I've got a good friend who's also a member of the community. Shout out to Shape, who is always kind of talking about the power of feng shui. But even from just a basic psychological level, like there are just certain anchors that we have. You know, there are just powerful associations that will create with objects. Even, you know, there could be a watch you have, and on one level it's just a watch, but it could be a watch that was given to you by an ex, so maybe there are some mixed emotions about that watch, or perhaps it's a watch that was given to you by a family member who's now passed away, so there are a whole bunch of memories that are associated to just this simple object, and so you actually have a lot of power in what you choose to put around you. It's not going to solve every problem that you might face, but you can guide things in a certain direction by having certain objects in positions where you might see them more often. Like if you're someone who loves flowers, just having them that in a place where it's going to catch your eyes regularly can be enough to just subtly give you a little bit of positive feedback, subtly lift your mood. And so there are just these really, really simple things that you can do and you can think about when you're not quite sure what to do and you're not quite sure why you're not feeling great. It is to just be quite intentional with your physical environment. Yeah, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I recommended the most to people was to start taking omega 369, which addresses, like, on a biological and physical level, it's insulating the electrical wires in the prefrontal cortex. But at I guess, a cognitive level, what it's doing is it's giving the person a simple enough task that they can be successful at it, and then harnessing the power of positive self-esteem, positive self-care. It's, it's a low motivation goal, which I like to promote that because basically people always have a low level of motivation, even when their motivation is high. But waiting for a high amount of motivation in order to change your behavior is something that's very unpredictable. And then once motivation does randomly come your way, it doesn't stay as long as you want it to. And it's like you don't have enough to go around to all the goals that you've pent up, all the behavior change that you've delayed, right? And so being able to say, oh, wait a second, if I just break my goals down into small enough pieces that even with a low level of motivation, I'm motivated enough to do that task. And I borrow that from a TED Talk that I saw once about unlocking behavior change, is based on mini goals and the motivation that comes, even if you're, let's say, doing 2 push-ups, then that's something that is going to make somebody feel good if they aren't constantly adjusting their goals to something that takes a higher amount of motivation. And so even just taking omega 369 once a day is one of those reinforcers that somebody can feel successful, can accomplish a goal with a low level of motivation, and then move on to the next low motivation goal that is going to really change their experience and their relationship with themselves, to be able to see themselves as successful, because everybody experiences low motivation. And so why not use it instead of just beating yourself up because it's not a high amount?
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. And I've also noticed when it comes to behavior change that consistency is more important than like magnitude, I suppose is the way to put it. So, committing to doing one small thing a day is probably going to be more effective than sporadically sort of just throwing yourself at something and getting something done. So, like, what would a good example be?
The TED Talk that I'm thinking of, like, it instructed people to do 3 things: to set a low motivation goal, to attach it to a behavior sequence that you're already doing, and then to do a mini celebration. So, for example, the speaker said, every time I go pee, I will do 2 push-ups and then I'll say, yay, I did it, or I'm awesome,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
You want to
and
reinforce
so
yourself. Yeah.
yep, it's a reinforcement thing. And
Yeah.
then that also gives you a trigger. And so for me, I found that was really helpful because otherwise I'm using all this energy that I don't have to try to pick at what moment of the day. And if I'm kind of randomly doing it, then I'm randomly going to get times of the day when I'm not motivated. And then I'm going to feel bad about myself. Whereas if I always plan on doing, let's say, 2 push-ups before I take a shower, well, I like taking showers and then I don't have to worry about being sweaty. And so for me, it's like, oh, now I don't have to think about it. I don't have to use energy. I've already got a good time to do that. And so
Yeah.
when you attach it to a sequence that makes sense for that activity, then it becomes even more powerful.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it's just a good lesson in understanding how your habits really do dictate like the inertia of your life. Because like once something is a habit, it no longer requires you expending kind of conscious effort to make that thing
Yes.
happen. It becomes far more automatic. And it's almost kind of like you've embodied it. So your body will just tend to do that thing now, like once you've established it as a habit. And so it's your habits that are guiding where your life is going ultimately. And that's why the importance of these small things that you're talking about, Maddie, just doing your push-ups before you jump in the shower, um, they compound over time, and we can almost
Yeah.
take some lessons from looking at the way that hex functions and understanding these small decisions. When we put in that little bit of effort in the beginning, will then almost kind of like they become their own little habit printers. They're their own
Ooh,
version. They
that's really good.
yeah, they compound on themselves, right? They're habit printers. And so, that might be a little association you can make for yourself, when you're looking at your Staker app and you're looking at your money printers, just ask yourself, what have I done today to begin investing in my habit printers? And what am I compounding today? What is this action that I'm taking now going to be worth to me in 5 to 10 years from now? If I, instantiate this as a habit in my life. So, yeah, small
So,
things, as we've discovered with Hex, can be very, very powerful and have a huge effect on your life down the track.
I know that I've only got a couple more minutes, but
Mm.
this is an amazing point that you've brought up. I love this idea. And so let's see if we combine these. So uh, let's say if people make the rule for themselves that before you check your Staker app or your T-Share app,
Mm-hmm.
then you will do a self-care activity or a self-esteem activity. Wow, how powerful could that be?
That could be huge. That could be huge. Compounded over 15 years, mate, massive.
Because I think a lot of people, like when they check the price, are getting rewarded, right? And
Yeah.
it'd be cool if you rewarded yourself for more than just checking the price. But if
Yeah.
you inserted and you said, before I check the price, I will do this self care activity, right? I'll take my vitamins or I'll do my 2 push ups. Wow, that would be training yourself almost to make those things really easy to do.
Definitely. I do think there's something in that. And like you said, it kind of satisfies all the criteria that you mentioned from that TED talk, and that you're kind of putting it into, a behavioral sequence that's already part of your day, something that you do so easily, right? It's so easy for you to pull out your Staker app. You're already really motivated to do it. You get that nice pleasure reward from it when you take a look at it. And so if you just insert something that maybe just requires a little bit more effort on your behalf before giving yourself that reward, then I think you're into a big winner.
And of course, at some point, it would be really cool if we could not just make time locks, but make behavior locks. And this is one of my goals in the space, is to innovate ways to program mental health into money specifically, for example, you would pay yourself to do the behavior change you want to do, whether it's to lose weight or exercise more, whether it's to eat better, to esteem yourself more, to curse less, to be in a better mood, to have healthier relationships, right? And so I think that there are a lot of possibilities now that we have a programmable money to be programming it into ourselves, the best version of ourselves, and the change that we want to see in ourselves and others.
I love it. Habit printers.
Let's
get them.
Hashtag habit printers. Blaze came up with that term, which I will forever quote. And,
yes.
Thank you to Hex Toshi for the $55.55 super chat. Keep this in mind, all. Don't stress on the could haves. If it should have, it would have. Love you, Hex/Pulse peeps. And I agree that there's so much opportunity and abundance in the future that looking at the past really isn't always as helpful as looking forward is. And paying things forward, having hope, and continuing to contribute to the community is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Love it, Hex Toshi.
So we reached our 2-hour mark, and I'm definitely not going to top your habit printer idea. So
I never will either.
I don't believe you. I think we're going to be around in the community for a while, and I think we just may have come up with the title of your talk for the Hex conference.
Sounds awesome. Sounds awesome.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope we can continue to have this as a regular thing, because I really enjoy having you as a guest.
Yeah, I love my time chatting with you, Maddie. So yeah, always happy to come on. Just shoot me an invitation. I'll be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in, and remember to keep taking care of yourselves, to keep spreading mental health, to stake and sacrifice wisely, my friends. Take care.
Love it. Bye, guys.